Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett.
And I'm Janice Baker. What do you get when you put a theatrical scenic artist with a documentary filmmaker, designer, artist, traveller and a shipbuilder?
Well, you get the two guests who are on this edition of OurTime. Welcome back.
Oh, that's a nice welcome back. Thank you.
We missed you.
Thank you.
Not much, but we did a bit.
Charming.
Just because you were cruising. I told everybody all the places, exotic places you'd been to. She didn't go to any of them. No. Not one of them.
No,
Where
but I
you
did go to Venice. We sailed
Yes.
out of Venice, which was just beautiful.
Yes.
And we did the Greek islands. So 12 days on a cruise ship, which was just...
You poor thing.
Terrible.
Somebody has to keep the European economy going.
Yeah.
And it was also because it was some special times in your life, like birthdays and...
We had
wedding
birthdays and wedding
Yes.
anniversary in Amalfi of all places.
You poor thing. Now listen, we have two fantastic guests for you to meet on this edition, RodneyClarke and StellaGinsberg, who are people I've known for a very long time, but part of that very long time is you've had the most interesting life. Obviously that's Rodney.
Rodney and Stella, welcome.
Thank
nice
you.
to have you here.
Let's start off with how you two actually met.
Because, well, Rodney, you're from Australia. You're in
Yes,
Australia.
yes.
And Stella, you are from Argentina. So
Don't cry for me.
how did you actually come to meet each other?
Well, we both of us work for the Australian Opera, and Rodney, when arrived back to Australia and he started working in the opera company, he decided to bring his personal belongings to Sydney because he decided to stay. And the more important part was the car and all back. And
Tell us about the car though. Back in-
1947
Yes.
Jaguar, where is, I used to have one in Argentina,
Who gave it to you?
my dad,
And how did you not have it anymore?
because I've been a naughty girl politically. And to teach me a lesson, he sold it.
How dare he?
And I left the country to find it somewhere else.
She never actually found the same car.
No, but the same model.
But how funny is that you would actually meet each other and you have the same sort
very
of car?
same car.
So,
Which is yours is grey. Was yours grey? Or were they all grey?
different colour.
I don't know what colour. What was it?
Oh, well, who knows? It's just been so long.
I can't remember.
But the point is, you are both now scenic artists, having painted scenery for many theatrical companies that have toured Australia and, in fact, the world. And we'll talk about some of those. But you met on a paint floor
Yes.
because you were working long hours.
That's right. Often during the main opera season for the year, we'd be working heavy overtime for 3 or 4 months of the year, weekends and nights. So you didn't get much of a social life outside of work. So you got to know your colleagues
Very
pretty well.
Yes, because you'd eat together.
Yes, that's
and
right.
spend the whole day
So,
together.
Yeah.
And just go home to sleep. And sometimes sleep there, I would imagine, as well. Because when you've got a rush on with a job...
Oh, yes. Yep.
You
Well, often we were still painting the scenery when the trucks turned up to take it down to the Opera House.
Oh, to start the performance.
To start the the rehearsals.
Yeah.
So they'd take it, and we'd get frantic calls to go down to the Opera House to finish off the painting work.
Well, just so that everybody understands what we're really talking about, the art of painting scenery is almost a dying art these days, isn't it? Because of projection being used.
That's right.
And
big
you know,
screen.
big
Yes.
screen
Yeah.
walls and things. People aren't painting like they used to. So let's just take a look at some of the backdrops that you've painted, because these are fantastic. And just whip through who you were painting them for.
That was a play for the Sydney Theatre Company.
And we should explain this is on a floor, a flat floor.
A flat floor.
Which you paint standing up, and there's a few pictures that'll make sense of
That one was based on Brett Wiley. This was a musical. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum.
Now, hold this shot for a minute, because this is a really special one.
It is. This is a gauze, which is an open weave material, like a heavy mosquito net. So it's full of holes, very delicate, You can't make any mistakes while you're painting on them.
So when it's lit from the front, it looks like that. But then when
solid.
it's lit from behind, it just
disappears.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful transformation that it creates on
We're going
stage.
to show you in a little while a very special piece of that. What's this one from?
That was Scheherazade for a Queensland Ballet Company. This was for Opera Australia, and it was an earlier My Fair Lady, not the one that's currently on, but this is
painted for that as well.
Yes, yep. This is a gauze, another gauze for the Bangara Dance Company. This is another Queensland production. I think it was a musical. I can't quite remember that one. This was for a Nutcracker production by another Queensland ballet company, and a Shakespeare Twelfth Night.
And if you can sort of turn your head around that's laying flat on the floor,
yes,
it gives you an indication of just sort of how big they really are.
Another play for the Sydney Theatre Company, a comedy, that one.
And you can see that in the background of the little frame on the side.
This is working on a Bell Shakespeare production.
Just hold that shot for a minute, because this isn't you, although it looks like you. This is Russell, who works with you.
Yes, Russell, who's worked with us for probably 25 years now.
And the car is there.
And the car is
There's the car
covered up in the background.
Now, years ago, when Russell and I went off to do murals or something like, people would say, "Oh, you're brothers, aren't you?" And we'd just laugh. But these days, they say, "Oh, are you his father?"
How unkind. You might have noticed that you're standing up, or he's standing up, painting with the long-handled brush. And
that's right.
Really, your wrist becomes your elbow and so on.
That's right.
It's a complete change, yeah.
Yep.
But so when you're doing that size, you have to start at the top, otherwise you're walking across the work.
Well, we do,
you
and
do.
that's a hazard, but it's also, we think, an advantage. I spent a little bit of time with an Italian opera company who also paint on the floor, and they consider that that's the only way to do it. But if you work in London, they have big traditional vertical frames in a special building. They sometimes have 4 of these, and the painters stand right up close to them. They're nailed up onto these big frames, so they can paint very closely, but we think it's inhibiting. You can't splash around, you can't be, we can be a lot freer by walking all
and
around.
to get shadows and things, you can use thinner paint.
That's right. They have a lot of trouble, and they have to constantly flick paint from their brushes so it's drier when they put it on. Otherwise it all drips.
So Stella, how did you start as a painter of scenery? How did it begin for you?
Oh, that's a long story. In Argentina, I went to art school, and nighttime I used to do courses in the theatre techniques, and my sister wants to be a ballerina. And
you didn't want to be a ballerina?
No, but I was using the opportunity when I wait for her to draw. And somebody said, "Oh, you like drawing? Did you been to see the guys who paint in the underground of the theatre?" And I went and I discovered backstage and theatre painting.
So how long have you been painting? What time is it now?
About over 50 years.
And are you the same, Rodney?
Yes.
Because you worked at a place here in Adelaide called the Old Kings Music Hall. Was that your introduction?
It was, and it was a wonderful introduction, I must say, because it was
for all of us, because we all
worked there.
Because it was light-hearted and everyone was very jolly. I found it, and it didn't matter if you made a few mistakes. And when the technical manager of the Old Kings was looking for someone to paint scenery, I put my hand up. I said, "Look, if you can't find anyone else, I'll do it." But I made mistakes, but in a music hall, it was all part of the fun and game.
It was.
So it was a fantastic, and it made me realise that was the place that
the sad thing is, though, that as we've all aged and we are all heading towards the big 7-0. Oh, well, you're already there, I know, but.
And me.
We never give that away. But you're more or less thinking of retiring.
Yes, that's right.
And the sad thing is there's really very few places in this country that still paint scenery.
Well, in Melbourne, it's still the traditional techniques is still being used.
There is a workshop here in South Australia as well.
Yeah,
But it's
but
not something that people are sort of picking up.
No.
Look, we've got a clip here that we've sped up really fast to show what it looks like starting at the beginning of laying out, in this case, it's the actual
Paris Opera gauze.
gauze, And you can see from the vision here that it's starting off with a white sheet, and you can see the piece slowly growing. And it's sort of incredible when you realise, how long did the cloth take to paint?
It probably, there were three of us, Russell, Stella and myself, working on it, and it probably took us about a month, I think, to do, because there were a lot of patterns that had to be made up as well, drawn, and we use a dressmaker's pounce wheel to cut into paper patterns.
To show
and then they're put on the gauze, rubbed over. It's very complex.
But it's the change from a small something to this super large something.
Well, even fine artists were taught to do this using a grid system. If they'd done a
So you
small
grid it all
sketch,
first,
we grid it,
and from that...
And copy a small square onto a large square.
Right.
So it's actually fairly straightforward once you're familiar with the techniques.
Well, we knew there would be too much to talk about in one segment because there's another whole side to both of your lives, which we're going to come back in a moment, and it's all about building a ship and making a documentary about the old ships that used to sail here in South Australia. We'll be back in a tick.
Our guests are still with us, Rodney and Stella, because there's still a lot we need to talk to you two about.
Well,
Scenery painting is not the only thing that you have been doing. So
talk us through how you found out about a ship to be built in London, or not in London, where was it?
It was in Kent, just off the River Thames.
So you left Australia because you heard about this ship that was going to be built. Just quickly tell us what it was and how it happened.
It was an old sailing ship built in 1911 that had virtually finished its working life carrying cargoes, and it was about to be, the masts were about to be cut down and it was going to be used as a barge. And I joined a little syndicate of people who loved old sailing ships, who had a plan of buying it, rescuing it. It was in Sweden, in Gothenburg. They brought it across to a little creek in Kent and proceeded to rebuild the whole ship. Massive job.
Massive job. How many people worked on it?
Well, over the time there were dozens of people. Some of them were just friends who'd come down for a few weeks to lend a hand, travellers who thought it might be interesting.
Yeah.
Some of them were part of our little core group of people who'd regularly come down.
And how long did that take?
It took, well, there was some work done in Sweden, but the bulk of it in England took 2 years.
Right. And it ended up looking like this.
Yeah.
This is the amazing thing.
Yes.
And it's called?
Eye of the Wind.
And once you'd built it, you actually sailed it back to Australia?
Yes, on a voyage that took about 10.5 months.
Wow.
Island hopping.
It's
around the
so
world.
beautiful.
She is. She's a magnificent ship.
Stunning.
And the brown sails are unusual, is that?
But that was because the lad who set the whole scheme up and the principle behind it all was a Londoner who had grown up seeing the very famous Thames barges on the River Thames, and they all had tan sails. So he was very keen to keep this.
So you didn't know Rodney at this time?
No.
You had no idea that you were going to be with a man who was a sailing ship builder and then a filmmaker, and he dragged you all over the world.
Oh, well, you know, the unexpected.
But with young children too.
Oh, two.
Yeah.
A little girl and a little boy took.
Where are some of the more unusual places you went filming and holidaying?
Well, in general, it's always filming. It's sort of just interesting traveling with kids. A lot of doors opens quicker because people take pity of you when you travel with young kids.
Yes.
But children are happier because the parents are there and the family groups is stronger.
Yes.
So one goes, everybody else follows.
Where did you go? You were in Siberia for a while. Weren't you on this?
Oh, well, the Gobi Desert.
The Gobi Desert.
Yes.
Hey,
yeah.
well,
Nice place to leave.
Yes, especially when it's cold. There were times in the Gobi in northern China when it was minus 30 degrees. And for people from Australia or even from Argentina, that's pretty hard to comprehend. It was fearful at times, very difficult.
I only take the kids out of the hotel on midday for half an hour.
Yes,
Yes,
that was it.
That was
Yes.
it. Yeah.
But you've also had to camp and make do in some very strange places
yeah.
around the world, haven't
Cuba,
you?
Cuba.
Oh,
Was,
we've been to South America, sort of Europe, Asian,
Vietnam.
sort of Vietnam,
Well,
Indonesia.
but the other thing is,
China.
but you ended up in France painting for
A big French music hall, which I thought was heavenly. Actually, surrounded by beautiful young showgirls and painting really fantastic traditional
paint.
scenery, which was just up our alley.
Yeah.
which we're sort of losing out of the theatre, as we said at the beginning of the
Yes,
program.
yes, that's right. And towards the end of our time in France, the owner of the theatre actually did upgrade to the latest
new stuff.
screen technology. We were ready to hand it over anyway, but it was part of that big technical change that's
It's
hitting
affected the
theatre.
world. Well, it's
Affecting
changed everything, really.
Yes, yeah.
But so all these years you've been filming a lot of trains and a lot of railway things.
Yes.
But then you also managed to acquire all this footage. Just explain about the Mosquito Coast.
The Mosquito Fleet is a friend and I who were studying at university together were invited out on two very old ships in their 90s, built in Tasmania, which were still carrying cargoes around the South Australian Gulf ports into the 1960s. And we loved the idea of filmmaking, and we bought a couple of 16mm and 8mm cameras and proceeded to go out. I mean,
That's why this is in black and white and 4x3.
Yes, that's exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Because this is old footage.
50 years old.
Yeah.
It's a bit rough, but with modern editing techniques, you can actually
I've been
make
on
it
that.
presentable.
I went on that after they had restored it, like many years ago.
No. That what happened was they built a new ship in Port Adelaide, and they named it after this vessel.
Oh,
but
right.
this one sank in 1971 off the New South Wales coast.
Right.
Oh, right.
But that's the original.
That's the original
Right.
one, built in Tasmania.
It's hard to believe that our food sources and wool was actually carried in such small vessels.
Yes, that's right. Well, there were upwards of 70 of these racing across the Gulfs, non-stop,
Really?
for 100 years, carrying
Because the roads weren't
very good.
but and also the big trucks and overland vehicles
weren't there, and the Gulf ports didn't have any train connections, which was also a point in these ships being able to keep going. For so
it's
long.
amazing though when you see footage like that. Thank goodness you've done this and preserved that, and you're now offering this to different museums. But
yes.
if there's somebody who's really interested, if you're really interested in getting hold of a DVD of this, we're just putting up on the screen now where you can get hold of these or how you can contact Rodney to make that happen. because it's really worth having. It's part of the history that would really have disappeared
Very
if somebody
special.
like Rod
Yes,
hadn't
very
done what he did. So in retirement, what are you planning to do, Stella? Do you think you'll really retire, or will you just be grandma?
I will open the cupboards and let all the old projects coming out. Who knows what will happen? But it will be an exciting time, having time to enjoy really my interest.
Yeah.
Your interest instead of his.
Yeah, well, he will have his own time, I will have mine.
That sounds like a perfect idea. But your time, you're planning to take up with...
Well, I spent years on our travels filming the last of the world's steam locomotives working in very remote areas of the world. So I've got probably years of work ahead of me, collating all this footage and trying to make some sort of story,
out of it.
films out of it.
Wow.
It's just amazing, though, isn't it?
What a life.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, it's fitting
Fascinating.
several lives into one.
Yeah.
It is.
And never really letting the grass grow.
No.
Do you think, though, that the early sort of theatre work that you did with having to just keep working till projects were finished, has that sort of stimulated you both to keep going, do you think?
I think it has. You know you've got a deadline. There's no delaying. It's all there in front of you. You've got designers or theatre directors breathing down your neck, wondering when it's all going to be.
Yes, but here's the big question. Will you have the incentive to keep making the films afterwards? Because you won't have anyone cracking the whip.
Well, Malcolm, when I was doing the first Catch films with our little cameras, that's what I thought I was going to be, a documentary filmmaker.
You being not the Leyland brothers, it would have been the Clarke.
So 50 years later, I'm now embarking on what I originally thought I was going to do.
Amazing.
So,
the work is amazing, and we'll be back for our last segment in just a tick, and we'll show you a little bit more.
With Rodney and Stella, with still some beautiful photographs to show you of this amazing
Well, more importantly, who's this, Rodney?
that's my mother. She ended up... I used to write to her in Australia while we were restoring the ship, and then we were starting to look for people to join us. And my mother signed up for a voyage to Australia.
What a girl.
Yes.
And she's 96 now.
She is, yes.
She'd
But the
probably do it all
voyage
over
that
again.
took you how long?
10 and a half months.
To come
yes,
back.
yep.
And look at you looking like the old salt.
This is us
pipe.
dreaming of a future time sailing around the world.
Who's the other fella?
That's David, my closest friend of the time, and the other lad who filmed the Catch documentary.
And look at you.
This is me sitting on the main boom of one of the Catches
With your
down at
winkle
Port
picker
Adelaide.
shoes. That's what I
Well,
really
that's
like.
right. It's all part of a bygone era. This is sailing through the North Atlantic on either wind. Not long
Obviously,
after
you're
we.
dyeing your hair then.
No, all natural. Very young.
And that's the ship.
That's her.
Glorious.
How do you
full
feel when you
sail.
look at that?
Oh, very proud of all
Excellent.
the work that we put into her.
But speaking of pride, there are these other shots we didn't show before that both of you have worked on, other backdrops, just looking at your other life, that we just wanted to show because of the diversity of what these are. The paintwork that you've done isn't always the same. There's...
No, that's a classic.
No, but that's one of the beauties of scenic art is that you're constantly doing different work all the time. Never classical scenes, modern, and everything in between.
And did have a doorway in the middle.
Well, yes, it doesn't quite look right, but that's theatre.
Even for something like this. Was this for NIDA?
Yes, this was a student production at NIDA, so we had a long association with them, helping them.
That's the National
through
Institute of Dramatic
Dramatic
Art in Sydney,
yes, yep.
the university.
Yes, yeah.
Another one?
Another one from for them. And this is Love Never Dies, which was a sequel to Phantom of the Opera, very clever young Australian designer. Good.
I can't remember. Did you paint some of the Australian version of Phantom? Or
Phantom.
That was done here.
That was done here,
Right.
but we were involved in some of the big props and
Right.
curtains.
Look, there's just so much to talk about in your amazing lives together, and the fact that your kids are taking over, your daughter's, and what she's doing as well for the future.
Yes.
It's just great to meet people with such a positive attitude, don't you think?
Wonderful. Just
We're now
wonderful.
tired. We're tired because you've lived such an exciting life and such a diverse
Stunning.
life. Stella, thank you
Yes.
so much for being part of OurTime. Rodney,
My pleasure.
maybe when you do the train doco, if we're still around in the next 10 years,
Yes.
it took about that long to get the mosquito.
Well, it did.
Fleet up,
Yes.
didn't it?
Too long. Too long.
And there's a familiar voice on that if you get to see it. So until next time, Janice, how lovely to have you back.
Why, thank you, Malcolm. I missed you,
I did too.
really.
Until next time, keep yourselves nice till then, and we'll see you soon.